This is Rob Bovarnick, and we're here for another in the series of brief vignette lectures on various aspects of business law. Today we're going to be talking about the Series LLC. I was speaking with a friend of mine recently and wanted to know what I was going to be talking about. And I said, well, I'm going to talk about the Series LLC. And he said, well, what is that? And this is a friend of mine who's pretty sophisticated. And he said, well, I know about the LLC, but what's the Series LLC? So that said to me that it's a very good topic to discuss today. Obviously, we're all aware of what the LLC is, or the limited liability company. That is the most recent type of business entity. It came on the heels of the subchapter S corporations, and all 50 states have limited liability companies. In 1996, Delaware, which is generally at the forefront of business law and corporate law, came up with this concept of a Series LLC. And in essence, a Series LLC has a master umbrella agreement, the limited liability company agreement, and then under that, it has a series of cells, each one being a separate entity, can have separate owners, has separate assets, separate liabilities. Now you can ask yourself, why would somebody want to do that? Is it good for anybody? And the answer is, it is available to anybody, but it doesn't apply to anybody. Really, it is important in situations where a company is going to have multiple assets and they want to have each of them separately protected. I'll give you two examples. If you are a developer and you're developing various properties, you could put each property in its own cell. Or if you own a taxi cab company, you would put each cab in its own cell. Now, what happens is you set up the initial LLC, and the operating agreement must say it's a Series LLC, and we'll get to that in a second. And then each cell would either hold the assets, the property, the taxi cab, and it has the corresponding liabilities. The advantage to that, and the easiest example is probably with the taxi cab, is let's say that you're running a cab company and you have a fleet of 10 cabs. And if you have only one limited liability company owning all 10 cabs and one of the cabs is in an accident, then the assets of the entire LLC are at risk. If you do it in a series and you have a cell, if you've done it properly, then the only thing that is at risk are the assets of that particular cell. In our example, that one cab. The other 9 cabs, each of which are in their own cells, are totally safe and are not subject to the claims of a creditor of the one cab creditor. Same situation when you have a piece of property. If you have an accident and a piece of property, if you have multiple cells, then all the other cells will be safe. Not every state has the Series LLC. As I said a few moments ago, Delaware was the first state, and they came up with the concept in 1996. Since then, 7 other states have come up with the concept, and I never remember the entire list. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I will mention one other state that has it, and that's Illinois. And I mention Illinois because their laws are slightly different. In Delaware, what happens is, to do an LLC, you do a normal operating agreement and a normal certificate of organization. The formation documents have to have specific language indicating that it is a Series LLC. There's no other notification that is necessary to give to creditors of the LLC or the cells. Compare that to Illinois, where they have significantly greater notification obligations, and that each cell has to indicate that it is part of a series. And that's to the benefit of the creditors, so that they know that if there is a claim that they have to make, that in Illinois they can only make it against the one cell. In Delaware, they may not know that until they actually commence a lawsuit and try to go after it. The other thing that's very important to remember is that accounting is crucial for a Series LLC to maintain its separateness. Each cell has to be accounted for separately. The books and records must be separate. If you use one set of books and records as you would for a single LLC, then the court is more likely than not going to say, well, this is really not a Series LLC, and mash everything together. So if you're going to do this, make sure that you have a good accountant who's going to make sure that everything is properly accounted for. The other concern that you need to have is that while LLCs can be operated and are operated in every state, as I've indicated, only 8 states recognize Series LLCs. Now that doesn't mean that you can't be in Texas, for example, which does not have the Series LLC, and have the Series LLC in Delaware. You can certainly form a Series LLC in Delaware and then file a foreign registration certificate in Texas. The question that you need to have asked is, if there is some claim raised in a Texas court, will the Texas courts recognize the separateness of the Series LLCs, or will they mash it all together and say it's one LLC? That's one of the reasons why people are somewhat hesitant to use the Series LLC. The other one is simply that there is very little case law on this topic right now. There's obviously a lot of case law on limited liability companies, but there's very little on the Series LLC. So we're still in the formative stages of the world of Series LLCs. Under the right set of circumstances, it makes a lot of sense, and I would encourage you to look at it more deeply.